Thank you. It is really good to be here, and it's fun to look through the audience and see so many fellow mayors and other people who are committed to doing growth the right way and the right kind of cooperation. I am here actually today because I want to be here. I get asked to go a lot of places or to speak here, to attend this meeting, and actually kind of raised my own hand to come into this meeting to ask to do this role for a main reason. I wanted the chance to introduce Governor Hickenlooper. Two reasons. First, our paths have kind of been remarkably intertwined. We were both, came out before running for public office, we're both in business. And John's story about starting businesses in Denver and the growth of those businesses is really a fun one to me to hear about. And then in 2003, we both ran for mayor. And then in 2007, we were both re-elected mayors of our hometown. And then last year in 2010, we both ran for governor. And like I said, not only are the paths the same chronologically, but I kept finding myself involved in a lot of the things and caring about a lot of the same things that Governor Hickenlooper does. Three or four things about him. By the way, it says a lot about him. When I got ready to get up, he said, "You're not going to read the whole bio they sent you about me, are you?" And I said, no. He said, well, good. They don't need to hear the 2 pages. Which says a whole lot about his whole attitude toward himself. He takes what he does very seriously, but he doesn't take himself all that seriously, and that's a refreshing change in politics sometimes. But 3 or 4 things I really appreciate about him. Number one, the whole idea of cooperation is real to him. One of the things he told me he loved about being mayor of Denver was, even though they were the big city in the middle of it, he loved pulling all the towns and cities and suburbs that rung Denver in together to accomplish a bigger purpose. Number 2, I love the fact that he understands how to deal with very hard budgets. He's had to do that as governor, and he had to do that as mayor. But he does that with an incredibly compassionate and forward-thinking view toward it. He and I were both involved in trying to address cities' issues with homelessness, and I went out and spent some time with him in Denver. Denver has a program called Denver's Road Home, which I think is one of the best urban programs anywhere for addressing homelessness. And I know he's continued to be involved with that as governor. Third, I love it that he understands that behind everything is the whole role that education plays for us, and he's engaged early and intensely in education issues. And in the short time we had to visit before we came to this, he told me about several things that they're doing that parallel some of the things that we're doing here. And finally, I think, like I said, what I appreciate about him is, like I said, he doesn't think the story's about him. He really is here because he wants to make a difference. He doesn't have to. He has plenty on his plate in Colorado and things that could help him a lot more politically or otherwise to stay there. But he's here because he cares. And he's here because, like I said earlier, he doesn't think the story's about him. He thinks the idea of good government working even better is really, really important. So it is a privilege for me to introduce my friend and fellow governor. I will say one more thing before he came up. Lamar Alexander, who is now a senator but was a governor before me, said, you know, it is a wonderful thing to be the governor of your home state. And if your home state just happens to be Tennessee, well, it doesn't get any better than that. But if your home state can't be Tennessee, then Colorado is not a bad second choice. Please welcome the governor of Colorado, John Hickenlooper.
Bill Haslam, ladies and gentlemen. Just so we're clear, we did parallel, both of us, when we ran for re-election as mayors, were both won by 87%. So I like to think that I'm just about almost as good as he is. And then it turns out that when he ran for governor, he won by about 30 points, and I only won by 15 points. So now I know I'm about half as good, but I'm going to keep working hard. Thank you very much for that kind. Please you have one of the best governors in America. Please give him a huge hand. Everything he said about me is true about him, only double so, and that shows up at the polls. It's great to be back in the Music City. I warmed up for this trip last weekend to go see the U2 concert on Saturday night in Denver, and I wanted to make sure I was in the appropriate musical state of mind when I got here. I have to go back to the Mile High City today, which is unfortunate, or otherwise I'm sure I'd be seeing Jake Owen at the Grand Ole Opry, or hanging over, I guess, at the Bridgestone Arena, you've got Jimmy Buffett coming in this weekend. Given my druthers, just as his first choice would be Tennessee, and his second choice Colorado, certainly my second choice would be Tennessee as well. We are also a music city, and you haven't heard of these bands, but you keep your ears peeled for the Fray, One Republic, the Flowbots. We've got some rock and roll kids that are coming along. Just file that away. Then, when you're out in Colorado, come see the Red Rocks. It's a natural amphitheater. It's not quite like the Grand Ole Opry. We don't quite have the traditions, but it's not a bad place to hear music. And I am, in all seriousness, delighted to be back in Tennessee. We are very mindful of the severe weather you all have been having and the flooding along with so many southern states, and the challenges that creates. And we wish all of your impacted communities Godspeed in rebuilding and making sure that those who have been put most at risk have the resources and are able to recapture as much as possible of what's been lost. I want to recognize all the folks on this panel. This is a great group of people. We get to do this every once in a while in Colorado as well. And this is, in many ways, where real progress gets created, is bringing some different perspectives together and some smart people and putting those ideas out to a group of people. You guys had a leadership exchange group that came out to Colorado, I think, about 3 years ago. And it's great to see some of the ideas that we had, like your Transit Alliance, like the Mayor's Caucus that the mayor has created or helped to create, to see those ideas being done better, right? We're going to we do the best idea we can, we give it to you all, and then you take it and put your minds to it, and it automatically gets better, right? That's how progress works. Now, I know a number of you through that leadership exchange got a chance to meet me, and you're probably kind of surprised how the heck I got to be governor. And for those of you who didn't hear that story, I started out far away from ever considering being governor. I came out to Colorado as a geologist, intent on studying rocks, finding oil and gas. But the energy boom went bust in the 1980s, so our company got sold. I got laid off, and I was forced to reinvent myself. And I ended up going into the restaurant business. I opened Colorado's first brew pub, a restaurant that brews its own beer. And I guess you could say going from rocks to selling beer to a career in politics, it's probably a case for evolution in reverse. But it is my life, and at least it brought me back to Nashville, so life is good. I also wanted to point out that several of my staff and some of the civic leaders in Colorado heard I was coming back out to Nashville, and they said, if you're going to show them and inspire them towards collaboration and regional improvement, you might be, they're a competitor with Denver and with Colorado. You might be putting your state in some risk or hurting our competitive advantage. And that's crazy. That goes contrary to everything I believe. They were saying, you're going to tell them what? You're going to give them your secrets? Oh, we don't have any secrets. Let's be real here. Our job, the better and more successful Nashville is, the better job you do of taking our ideas and making them better, expanding them, improving them, making them your own, the more likely we are going to have to take those ideas back, and we're going to have to improve them, right? Your success is only going to make us better. And I think that if you look at that, for one of my staff, they brought out the promotional material for this event. And the promotional material, it says the Denver, Colorado region is often held up as a model for the kind of coordination of transportation and land use that Greater Nashville hopes to achieve. Denver, one of Middle Tennessee's top market competitors for economic development, invested billions of dollars in modernizing their public transportation, blah, 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 to attracting and retaining a labor force that's necessary to compete in the global economy. The flyer went on to say that I was renowned for my all-out, quote-unquote, all-out ambitious support of expanding our metro-wide transit system. Well, first, renowned? Me? No. Maybe for beer. We did build the biggest brew pub in the country. But what really mattered in that description is really nothing to do with us trying to steal jobs from Nashville or Nashville stealing jobs from us. The sentence in there to pay attention to is we invested billions of dollars in modernizing our public transportation system to position the area for attracting and retaining the labor force required to compete in the global economy, right? I mean, that's it. Colorado needs to, wants to, has to compete in the global economy. And so does Nashville, so does Atlanta, so does Portland, Oregon, and Dallas, and Minneapolis. You know, every other thriving metropolitan area in this country needs to compete on those levels. And when you step back and squint your eyes a little bit, Denver and Nashville are on the same team, right? We're divisions of the same corporation. When it comes to competing with the new world powers, and it's not just India and China we hear about all the time, it's Brazil. You know, in a couple of years, Brazil is going to be the 5th largest economy in the world. If I can say anything today that helps Nashville or Middle Tennessee succeed and do better, that I view my mission as accomplished, and that we will, your success, again, will create our success. Now, if there is one secret I'm going to harp on, and I guess there'd be two, but the primary secret is collaboration. No big secret, right? Everybody knows that that's where it's at. It's also willingness to invest. Now, collaboration, you know, Ben Franklin said, we must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly, we will hang separately. I mentioned that earlier that we'd had a trip to Atlanta. It was actually just last week to talk about transportation, and they're going to have a large ballot initiative about that city's regional capacity, the willingness to invest in solutions. And they had a panel. They had a couple of the suburban mayors from Denver, Mayor Ed Tower from Aurora, which is the 2nd largest city in Denver's metro area, and then the mayor from Lakewood, which is to the west, Aurora's to the east of Denver. Those two communities are like bookends to Denver. Denver's in the center, but I can tell you that closeness doesn't ensure compatibility. And you know, our history in Colorado has certainly been more often about rivalry. Now, the history between Denver and Aurora, as Denver began to emerge as a successful suburb and grew rapidly and attracted a lot of the wealth from the community, Denver became more often perceived as an island, as all the suburbs began to compete with the downtown. Before I got elected in 2003, my predecessor, Wellington Webb, who was a great mayor, and at that time the mayor of Aurora, Paul Tower, were engaged in a long-term feud, almost an endless battle. It went on for over a decade. Both those mayors served. Mayor Webb served for 12 years, and Mayor Tower served for 16 years. They were both great leaders, both great mayors, both doing what was good for their communities, but they didn't see eye to eye, and that's a nice way of saying it. Denver and Aurora may share a common border, but you might as well have it be the dividing line between the Sharks and the Jets, right? Both cities were ready to rumble over almost any issue, and we had plenty to fight about, right? Water rights, Denver had senior water rights. Aurora's were secondary. Water's a big deal out there. Business development and acquisition, commonly referred to as poaching, trying to lure one business from one community to the other, was a big issue. There was a residential development that was going to straddle the boundary between Denver and Aurora. Who would get the retail and the sales tax was a big deal. I used to always tell the story when I was trying to decide whether I wanted to run for mayor. I went out and visited suburban mayors, and mayors around the country, but the suburban mayors. And, you know, I met with Mayor Tower, and again, when we were on this panel in Aurora, his son is the present mayor of Aurora. But I met with the father, and he was a short, intense, pugnacious guy. And he was telling me, it's in the history, and I said, well, wait a second. Is it really the issues that separate Denver and Aurora, or is some of this personality? And he looked at me and goes, oh, your airport is keeping my citizens awake, and your economic development people are poaching our business. And I said, wait a second. Mayor, let's imagine just for a second that I was mayor of Denver, and we had a joint press conference, and you got all the credit. I made sure you got all the ink in the newspaper, all the sound bites on TV. Would that make a difference? And he looked at me and goes, well, it might. And, you know, a year later, I got elected mayor of Denver, and 6 months after I was elected, his son, Ed, got elected mayor of Aurora. So we were kind of mayor newbies together. And we realized right from the beginning that we had to change the status quo if we were ever going to be able to build bridges. And I'm not talking about literal bridges, but in the way we operate. And I grew up as a skinny kid with thick glasses and acne, and I was, my dad, when I was a little kid, told me if you can't talk your way out of a fight, you deserve to get whipped. And so I was willing to, take that olive branch out there and really look at, how do we begin building those bridges and recreating those relationships. And he was only too willing to be a partner in that. We chose to change from that old mythical perception of the West. And everyone thinks it's about the shootouts at the OK Corral. People don't realize that the West was really built. There were a lot more barn raisings where people came together to build something of common value than there were shootouts. And so we looked at some of the history, and Metro Denver did have an interesting, back in 1989, a bunch of the civic leaders were alarmed that all the leading citizens were moving out of the city, and yet many of these civic leaders believed in the Art Museum and the Museum of Nature and Science and the zoo and the Botanic Gardens. So they formed what was called a Scientific and Cultural Facilities District, and they got all of their boards to join forces, all of their membership teams to share data, and they went and did a regional-wide state sales tax, or city sales tax, metropolitan area sales tax. So in 8 counties, there was 0.1%. And now that generates about $43 million a year. And it's a very unique collaboration. It gives, supports the major, the big cultural institutions and scientific, Museum of Nature and Science, but also another 250 smaller entities throughout the metro area. And it got us in the habit of working together. B, it allowed Denver to grow into, in a funny way, kind of a national spotlight for our cultural, as a cultural center. Maybe not world-class, but certainly a very significant regional center for culture. We have the 4th most visited zoo in the country, the 4th most visited Museum of Nature and Science. We have the 2nd largest performing arts center in the country. All this wouldn't have happened without everybody kind of coming together. And so Mayor Tower and I kind of looked at that and said, all right, we're going to use this as how are we going to solve our water issues? And we started working together on how we can find efficiencies in our water system to maybe create extra water for Aurora. We agreed within 6 months we would do no poaching, that Denver or Aurora would offer no incentive to any business that they were to move jobs, pre-existing jobs, from one community to the other. And we looked at how we could work together around transportation and looking at it from a regional point of view. And he and I became 2 of the real leaders when we approached Fast Tracks. And I suspect many of you have heard about Fast Tracks. It's a multi-billion-dollar expansion of our transit system. We had a couple of light rail lines, but they were limited. This is going to include 122 miles of new commuter and light rail, 18 miles of bus rapid transit, about 21,000 new parking spaces connected with that transit, and enhanced bus service. Over the course of a couple of years, we got all 34 mayors, Republicans and Democrats, big cities like Denver and Aurora, and the smaller towns, little towns of 5,000 and 10,000 people like Centennial and Foxfire, all 34 mayors unanimously supported a 0.4% sales tax increase. And I think, we look at now, as we're building this out, and the benefits of how to do smart development around these new stations, that we worked very hard on, increasing transportation options, but also how do we develop new main streets in the suburban communities? How do we reduce pollution and costs? A big part of the way we got all those mayors to come on board was to do studies. Some of the mayors that were never going to get a light rail line in their community, we would do studies of their commuters, right? Because everybody commutes everywhere, right? One of the things that Mayor Tower and I started talking about was that I don't care whether the business comes into the city and county of Denver. I just want it in the metro area. So why don't we all work to get the businesses to come here, and then we'll let them choose what the best spot for the office is, because their workers are going to live everywhere, and they're going to spend sales tax everywhere, and they're going to, enhance the quality of life everywhere. So as we talked to the different mayors where they weren't even going to get a light rail line, we looked at the commute times with and without this transportation investment for their citizens, their taxpayers. And sure enough, it turned out that if we built this, their average commuter would spend 26, 27 minutes less on commuting every day for about 24 cents in taxes on the average. And when we start talking to people in this way, that what you're really doing is we're all paying some taxes. We're paying our tax, even though we're never going to get on a light rail train. We're essentially paying to get somebody else out of our way, right? Which is it's what the truth is to a certain extent, and people listen to that, right? And that's how we talk to every mayor. We gave them real numbers so that they could go to their citizens and say, this is why we're doing this. It allowed us to have a unified vision, and it also allowed us to have other bigger conversations down the road, which we're hard at work now in terms of, how do we think about a regional healthcare system, right? If we face some of the real challenges that we're all grappling with, I don't think any of us like a 2,400-page, well, there's some people that believe in it strongly, but when Congress makes 2,400 pages to talk to us about healthcare, most of us resist. But at the same time, who among us doesn't want to make sure that everyone, regardless of pre-existing medical conditions, can have access to health care? We all believe in that. So I think it's up to us to think regionally and say, all right, if we don't want to use the federal model, how do we do it on our own? And I think the Obama administration will let people opt out if we can solve the problems ourselves. We are now, as a region, investing in a world-class healthcare campus, doing research and development, biotech outreach, that also includes world-class healthcare services and delivery services with life science research tied in. So we get higher qualities and we measure outcomes and efficiencies. We've used the Fast Track's vision to talk about, affordable housing. Where does it belong? Energy efficiency, healthy communities. How do we create more walking? I think Mayor Dean would approve of the walking part, certainly. I don't know about 100 miles. I'm in awe, as I would say. And I lavish praise on Governor Haslam. I think Mayor Dean is already establishing himself as someone who is able to bring together the different components of the region and establish that Nashville is a partner in the rest of the community, right? It's not all just about Nashville. That Nashville's benefit is going to come down the road, and he's done a very remarkable job. He's about to go into a campaign, so I don't want to paint him into a corner. One of the questions is this kind of collaborative approach, is this cultural, in the culture of government, and repeatable, or is it really political personalities, right? The Mayor Towers, Ed Towers' son or father, Paul, he gives way, and Mayor Webb give way, and Ed Tower and I come in, and we have very different personalities. I think it is cultural, though, because what we've done now is we've got our Chamber of Commerce and our tourism, we call it Visit Denver, but our convention tourism office, our downtown Denver partnership. As we're in a mayoral election right now, they'll have the election in about 2.5 weeks, and at every debate, they're being asked, what's your attitude to regional collaboration? And as the new mayor of Denver, how are you going to help the suburban communities and make sure that each one of them is the best that they can be? Our newspaper, the Denver Post editorial board, has been a big believer and creates that ongoing cultural value. The leadership exchanges, like what you brought to Denver a couple years ago, we do the same thing, go to other cities, but those ways of bringing civic leaders together allows you to create a longer lasting culture and collaborate. We're seeing it even on the federal government level. We have several federal people here. People haven't talked about what President Obama's done in terms of getting the Department of Transportation and HUD and the EPA to work together. For the first time, I met lobbyists that have worked in Washington for 50 years. They've never seen it before. So if you're going after and trying to get a $500 million grant to help you do transit in Nashville, I guarantee you're going to have to demonstrate where you're going to do affordable housing. And HUD is going to be part of those conversations. The Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, who is, I think, one of the most talented administrators and managers I've seen in a long time, and Sean Donovan, who's the Secretary of HUD, they meet every 3 or 4 weeks, and their deputies meet every three or 4 weeks, and they are looking at how can they build off each other's investments, which is what any corporation would do, but our federal government's never done that. I think that level of collaboration at the federal government allows us at the regional level to take that next step forward, and we should all utilize it and celebrate it. Collaboration isn't easy. A friend of mine, when we were doing homelessness, said that getting elected officials to work together was, in essence, what do you call it? Unusual acts between consenting adults. Sorry, that wasn't. It's a good thing my wife didn't hear me say that. But I think it isn't easy. It's work. you know, if you look at the word collaboration, just spell it out in your mind, and you take off the first three letters, C-O-L, and you take out the last three letters, I-O-N, you're left with the word labor, right? And that's no accident. It is real work. And I think we've worked hard to make sure that we're always trying to look with our suburban mayors of what's in it for them, what's their self-interest, how can we make these compromises and decisions in such a way that every side gets benefited. My 8 years as mayor, we looked in each case, how can Denver help the suburbs? We recognize we'll never be a great city without great suburbs, without different and unique and diverse neighborhoods. And we have a certain responsibility to make sure that their success is every bit as great, if not greater, than our own. We had a guy come in 2 years ago, a company called DaVita, a kidney dialysis company, a Fortune 500 company, was doing a roll-up, and they were looking at where to put their headquarters. Actually, I think they had 6 cities they were looking at, and I think Nashville might have even been one. And their CEO came in to meet with me, and the first question he asked me was not how big a subsidy that we could give him or how much money we'd give him. He looked at me and he said, "What are you doing today that will improve the quality of life for the grandchildren of my employees?" And, you know, I took a deep breath. No CEO had said that to me before, but I think he's the sign of CEOs who are going to come. And I launched immediately into Fast Tracks, that we're building a transit system that's going to allow us to grow so that the grandchildren of our employees today are not going to get strangled on their own success. It allowed us to put aside the temptation of intense self-interest and really stand together as common, you know, with the new global perspective towards the competitive world and how to compete for business. That's the only way to do it. I think that's your success, and we'll be watching closely what happens in Middle Tennessee as you expand and grow. It is all of our success. And let me finish just by saying a little bit about the kind of the broader issue that faces all cities. And I think that's about how do you get people to believe in government? How do you begin to infuse state government and local governments with entrepreneurship and innovation? You know, we are increasingly worried about whether our economy, whether our education, whether our transportation systems are losing their edge, right? Are we beginning to lose ground from a competitive standpoint to China and India? And in many ways we are. You can't even argue that. You look at some of our failed energy policies and unfinished wars, a deficit of a magnitude that really betrays a broken political system that doesn't seem easily reparable. It demands collaboration. It demands us to put aside partisanship. When I ran for governor, I made a big deal of not doing negative ads. I even did an ad, you can Google it, it's kind of stupid. I shouldn't be talking about it, but I got into a shower 8 times with my clothes on, just saying that negative ads made me feel dirty and filthy as a way of kind of pushing them off. But that positive campaign, after the election's over, allows us to work together and put aside the partisan divides, right? There's a reason why General Motors doesn't do attack ads against Ford, right? Coke doesn't do negative, sinister ads against Pepsi, because they know that it breaks down people's trust in the brand, in the product, whichever product they're using. And in the end, people buy less soft drinks or buy less automobiles. And I think we focused a lot in Colorado in the last 4 months of hiring talent and focusing on what I call the 3 E's of you know, we should have less government, and we should make sure that government does what's essential, right? This country is based on, you know, equal opportunity under the law, which I think is what, you know, our Declaration of Independence says and what the Constitution helps to guarantee. Well, if that's the case, we need to make sure that government is just doing what's essential, right? What's really needed to create equal opportunity, right? It's our education system, our higher ed system, transportation system, make sure everyone gets around. But as we do what's essential, we should be effective. We make sure when we say we're going to do something, we do it, and that we should be efficient. I almost forgot my 3rd E. And you know, essential, effective, and efficient. You know, when you're efficient, you do things at the lowest possible cost. I think if we can bring that back to state government, to local governments, people will begin believing again. We've done a statewide, we call the bottom-up economic development process. Instead of me going out and telling people, you know, getting the 50 top business leaders together and deciding on the economic development plan for the state, we went out and talked to several thousand people in every county in Colorado and said, what are your visions? I mean, and how can we cut red tape and make government more efficient? How can we make sure we have better access to capital for small businesses? How can we, expand broadband access to all the rural areas of the state? And that in that process, and we call it the bottom up, not the bottoms up, just so you're clear. If that's my bar background, it makes sure I want you to have that distinction. But in the process, I think we began planting a seed that people can see a sense of entrepreneurship and innovation within the state government of how we're doing these things. And as we try to become more efficient and more effective and make sure that we are essential, that we are, really treating our citizens as customers. Every taxpayer has a right in every government service to be treated as taxpayers. Richard Florida is a social scientist and an economic historian who's written several books, The Rise of the Creative Class, The Great Reset, but he talks about places like the Front Range along Denver and the Washington-Philadelphia corridor, the region around Nashville, Middle Tennessee, as hotbeds of creativity and potential economic revival. And I think those seeds for revival include really the traditional quality of life issues like schools and diversity and artistic venues, music, beautiful environments. And in the end, that's what those conditions are what you're all meeting about here today. They're at the essence of what you're going to address this afternoon. And you're hopefully going to take, all the ideas that are presented here and expand them, make them better, and move the ball forward so that 2.5 years from now, we're going to be dragging Bill Haslam out to Colorado, and he's going to be telling all the things that you guys have gotten done, and the mayor as well, and then we're going to have to up our game a little bit. So in that effort, Godspeed.